its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame. Its face, or the space where a face should have been, was a void, a swirling black emptiness. "It's all your fault, you should have stayed asleep." Panic overtook me, and I ran. My legs felt like lead, my breath came in sharp gasps, but I didn't stop until I slammed the door of my room shut behind me. The knocking started immediately, loud, violent, relentless. Each blow shook the door, and I pressed myself against it, tears streaming down my face. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence. For what felt like hours, I stood there, trembling, waiting for the next sound. When nothing came, I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. I opened the door. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The world outside wasn't the same. The air was thick, suffocating, and the walls of the house seemed warped, their colors dull and faded. The clock on the wall caught my eye, and my stomach dropped. The hands weren't moving. It was 10 p.m. And it always would be. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? Years? Time doesn't exist anymore, not in this place. The town is empty now. No parents, no neighbors, no life. Just me. Wandering the streets, searching for an escape that doesn't exist. I haven't eaten or drunk anything since that night, yet I'm not dead. I should be dead. But I'm not. My body has changed. I've grown taller, impossibly thin. My skin stretches tightly over my bones, and my reflection in broken glass reveals the truth. My face is gone, replaced by a void. A black nothingness. I don't feel human anymore. The memories of my life before are fading. I've grown angry, angrier with each passing moment. At myself. At the town. At everything. And then, one day, I saw something. A boy. He was small, frightened. I watched as he tiptoed down the hallway, peeking into his parents' room. The sight filled me with rage. "Why are you awake?" The boy froze, his eyes locking onto mine. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't watching him. I was watching myself. And now, I understood. I had stayed awake. And now, I was the one who ensured no one else ever would. 2SD. Cal_10. They'll take you. Joan watched as the light danced back and forth on the horizon out to the west. The sun fell over the terrain, and the once glinting object turned to a silhouette on the dark bluish background of the sky. "What do you think it is?" Joan asked. Roy squinted out over the hill they sat atop. "I dunno, hun. It's probably a plane or helicopter or salmon." They had been parked and distracted by this thing for the past 20 minutes or so. He had brought them out there for a romantic evening, not to revel in something trivial. He had been meaning to do this for a while now, to spark the slow kindle of their marriage back alive. Although their love was deep for one another, time and life can stretch things thin. You needed to work and stoke to keep the fire going, and Roy intended to do so. The truck's headlights automatically kicked on. Dusk had finally fallen, triggering the automatic safety measure in all modern cars. He annoyingly flicked the switch for the headlights off, and now only the glow of the radio deck was the only artificial light they could see for miles. Say what you will about the desert, but when you want to be alone, it had its perks. He reached over to the radio knob, twisting it to the right. The volume of the FM station came to life, and Bob Dylan's voice rang out. "How does it feel?" Joan's face lit up, and she beamed over at him. Like it was meant to be. They had both been born before the rise of the classic sound of his music, but they both shared a love for the unique tone of Dylan's voice. The same song that played over the Bose speakers had been their first dance at their wedding. Like it was meant to be. He repeated her gleeful remark. Smiling, he leaned over to his wife. She welcomed his warm embrace and cupped her hands on his stubbled face. Closing her eyes, she kissed him gently, ground like a record of their life together. A complete unknown. The skip in the radio reflexively caused Joan to blink open for a second. She gasped and pulled back. Roy's eyes shot open. "What?" What is it? Joan's gaze was fixed on the front windshield. He followed her gaze across the overlook where they were parked. The silhouetted object was as bright as it was before the sun had set. Not only this, but the object seemed bigger than it was before, closer to them, but still dancing side to side. Joan turned the volume down, like a rolling stone, continued silently, almost fading into the background. Is it getting closer? Joan was almost whispering, as if not wanting the object to hear them. Roy noticed from their vantage point they were actually looking down at it now. He whispered back, closer and lower. Their eyes darted from side to side like they were spectators in a tennis match, the bright object a tennis ball being volleyed to and fro. Bob Dylan's voice rose. Take me? Who is they? She pointed at the roof of the pickup. Whoever they are. Whatever it is. Roy looked at his wife confused. The deep sense of safety overruled his thinking brain. How could she honestly think anything was wrong? Honey, don't worry, I got this. Wait, stop. He quickly reached for the door and yanked before his wife could rebuttal, stepping out simultaneously as the door swung open. Joan watched as her husband stood out of the truck and was illuminated by the glow of whatever floated above them. See, nothing to worry about dash. Roy shot into the air so quickly, Joan only briefly caught a glimpse of her husband's expression change from relaxed to that of horror as he was sucked into the sky. Lost_Ghost 2920. My friend has been acting weird since we went camping. First of all, if you haven't read part 1 or part 2, go do that, or else you won't understand. I'm sure now, it has to be a skinwalker. Or a changeling. Something that takes people and wears them like masks. Everything I've found online points to this. All the weird stuff at the campsite, the way Kane's been acting, it all fits. It all fucking fits. I can't sleep anymore because I know what this means for Kane. He's gone. Really gone. I've spent hours desperately searching for answers, clicking through endless forums and websites until my eyes burned from the blue light. There was this one thing, this tiny sliver of hope about a Navajo healer who might be able to help, but who am I kidding? Once they take your face, it's gone forever. And hell, maybe I'm wrong about everything. Maybe it's not even a skinwalker. The internet's full of lies, and I'm losing my mind trying to separate truth from fiction. I don't know what to do anymore. Kane's gone. Back to the story. You know how in part 1, I said shit had gotten a lot worse. Yeah, let me catch you up the rest of the way. Kane had left last night. That's when I went on my internet frenzy of collecting information. I still can't figure out what it wants with my family. This is a long shot. It seems as if whatever entity or force took my friend's face was completely unprepared for the complexity of human relationships and the myriad of connections that come with it. As time passed by, more and more people began to notice the oddities surrounding my friend's disappearance. Whatever it may be, quickly became aware of the growing suspicion surrounding his behavior. Initially, I believe it was merely trying to learn the nature of human life, perhaps learning how to mimic emotions and social cues in order to fit in. But now it has shifted its focus. Now, I can't shake the feeling that it's on the hunt once more, seeking its next victim, its next face to wear like a mask. The uncertainty is what chills me to the bone. Will it target Kane's family? Or perhaps my own family, who remain blissfully unaware? The thought of it preying on an innocent stranger is equally disturbing. The possibilities are endless. What had me as stumped is what drives a creature to abandon the wilderness. Perhaps the shadows of the forest no longer satisfied its hunger. Hunger can drive animals to odd things. That morning, desperation drove me to some questionable choices. I found myself following instructions from the darkest corners of the internet, stumbling around my house with burning sage like some cut-rate exorcist. I even caught myself browsing sketchy websites for silver bullets, and when you're seriously considering buying ammunition from someone called Wolfslayer420, you know you've hit rock bottom. Kim noticed something was wrong before I even worked up the courage to tell her. During our phone call that afternoon, while the bitter smell of sage still hung in the air, her voice carried that edge of worry I'd been dreading. "You're not yourself," she said. I tried to play it cool, brush it off with a laugh, but you can only pretend for so long that your world isn't unraveling. The truth kept clawing its way up my throat, demanding to be heard. I hesitated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Kim, I need to tell you something. It's going to sound crazy, but I think something's seriously wrong with Kane." The words tumbled out, a mix of fear and desperation. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wondered if she was still there. "What do you mean?" Her tone mirrored the turmoil brewing inside me. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "I don't know, exactly. But ever since we went camping, he's been different. He's been stalking my family, watching me, saying things that don't make any sense." Sure how to respond. "Diane? What's up?" "Ha. Diane?" I tried again. "Ha." I knew then that my worst fears had come true. "Kane." I typed, but the text said read below it, and no reply was sent. The silence was yet again oppressive, a heavy weight that crushed my chest again. I knew that Kane had taken his mom's face, that Kane and Diane were probably dead, with no chance of returning. I collapsed onto my bed, knees pressed to my chest, and my face buried in my hands. The tears flowed like a river, and I wept for what felt like hours. I was losing control of my life, and I knew it. The thought of being helpless, of being unable to save my friend, his family, or even myself, was suffocating. As I sat there, consumed by despair, I realized that these logs were my last hope. If anyone ever saw this, I wanted them to know the truth. Don't go camping. If you do, bring sage, a silver bullet, and some gall, because that's what it'll take to survive whatever is happening to me. I took a deep breath, wiped away my tears, and steeled myself for what was to come. I would do more research, try to find a way to stop this, no matter how slim the chances. And then, my phone rang. Joshua. He didn't say why, but he told me to come to the house immediately. My heart skipped a beat as I hesitated, unsure if I could trust him. But I knew I had to take the risk. I snuck into my mom's room and grabbed the gun she thought we didn't know about. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of trepidation wash over me. What was waiting for me at Joshua's house? Was it a trap, or a chance to finally uncover the truth? I didn't know, but I was ready to face whatever was coming my way. I'm writing this as I'm on my way to Joshua's house, my heart racing with every passing mile. I have no idea what to expect, but I know it can't be good. I'll write more after whatever happens, but for now, I'm praying to whatever God is listening to keep me safe. I'll need it. Oh God, this is so much worse than I thought. I had just arrived at Joshua's house, and my mind is reeling. There are 5 cop cars parked outside, and I can feel a sense of dread creeping over me. I got out of my truck, and that's when Joshua came charging at me like a linebacker, tackling me to the ground. I felt my head hit the concrete, and a searing pain shot through my skull, like a migraine mixed with blunt force trauma. As I struggled to catch my breath, Joshua screamed at me, his face twisted in rage. "What the fuck happened to Kane? What do you know, you little shit?" Spit flew from his mouth, hitting me in the face, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. The police officers rushed over, pulling Joshua off me, but not before he landed a few more blows. "Mr. Dunham, calm down," one of them shouted, but Joshua was beyond reason. "You know something you're not telling me. You see what he did to my Diane? What did you do to my son?" I couldn't focus on the pounding in my head, not with Joshua's anger and fear radiating towards me like a palpable force. He was right, of course. It was my fault. I didn't stop Kane from going into those woods, and I didn't tell anyone when he started acting strange. Now it's too late, and I'm left to face the consequences. As I looked up, I saw Diane, laid out on the living room floor. She looked peaceful, like she was finally at rest, but that illusion was shattered when I saw the hole in her chest. It was a ragged, brutal wound, with bits of flesh scattered everywhere. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I vomited all over the side of the road. The cops picked me up, checking me for a concussion, but I couldn't take my eyes off Diane's body. This was a crime scene, a scene of horror, and I was right in the middle of it. The police asked me if I knew anything, but I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I wanted to tell them everything, but I knew I'd sound crazy. Maybe Kane had already gotten to them, too. They asked me if I wanted to press charges against Joshua, but I shook my head. No, that's really not necessary. He's just a hurt husband and father. As I walked up to the car where they'd put Joshua, a cop stuck her head out the window. Might not be a great idea, champ. He's not well. But I had to try. I looked at Joshua, who seemed broken, confused, and scared. I could relate to that. Look, Joshua, if I did know anything, I would tell you or the police, I said, trying to reassure him. But he just looked at me, his eyes filled with anger and suspicion. You know why Kane hasn't been acting right. I hesitated, unsure of what to say, but then someone shouted from near the house, Officer Gillis, get over here. The cop rushed out of the car, leaving me alone with Joshua. That's when I broke, telling him everything. Look, after we went camping, Kane hasn't been right. I think whatever came back wasn't Kane. I'm so sorry, Joshua. I really didn't know this would happen. Joshua's face twisted in rage, and he spat at me. Fuck you. I've lost my wife, and that's all you can give me? My son is some mythical creature? I knew I had to get out of there, fast. You're the only one I can trust, Joshua. I'm going to fix this. I promise. I started walking back towards my truck, but the cops stopped me, telling me I couldn't drive. I had to walk home, feeling like I was being watched, like Kane was already closing in. I'm writing this as I'm sprinting back to my house, my heart racing with every step. I see a crow following me, its black eyes watching me, and I know I'm not being paranoid. Every time I slow down, the bird slows down, and every time I stop, it lands and caws at me, like it's taunting me. I just made it into the house, barricading the windows and door with every piece of furniture. I sighed in relief as I went up to the window, pulling back the dresser that covered it and peeked outside to see Kane was nowhere to be found. I knew I hit him because I could see liquid all over the porch, but it wasn't blood, it was more like a disgusting black sludge with the viscosity of honey. That's when I saw a bird coming straight for the window. I tried to push the dresser in front of the window, but it was too late. Kane had already crashed through the window. I couldn't look away as Kane, or whatever had possessed Kane, began to change. The transformation was like watching every horror movie I'd ever seen, compressed into 30 seconds. His feathers thinned and melted away, each one dissolving like candle wax as his body stretched and swelled to human size. The worst part was the sound, the wet snap of wings twisting into arms, bones crackling like kindling in a fire as they forced themselves into new positions. When the teeth burst through his beak, they didn't just appear. They ripped through like nails through rubber, bringing waves of thick, black ooze that dripped between them. By the time it was over, and everything looked normal again, I'd forgotten how to breathe. We were standing there in the middle of my living room. This is when I had stupid trivial thoughts run through my head like, why did I never go back to check the campsite? Why did I not even try to reach out or find a Navajo healer? Did I care that little about my friend, or about my family? But there he was, the creature that stole my friend's face and used it to kill his own mother and terrorize my loved ones. Why? Why would you do this? I stammered. The being that had once been my friend Kane let out a low, menacing chuckle. The sound sent shivers down my spine, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. It wasn't even trying to mimic Kane's voice anymore. Instead, it spoke in a strained, raspy tone. Lived 100 years. 100 life forms. 100 places. I took a step back, my mind reeling. Okay. Why come here then? Nowhere else to go. What do you mean? The being's eyes seemed to bore into my soul. My people. They were coming. Hungry. I had nowhere to run until he showed up. I knew exactly what it was talking about. You mean on our camping trip? The being just stared at me, its empty eyes seeming to suck the life out of me. And then, in a voice that was perfectly, eerily Kane's, it said, "Goodbye, Sean." For a second, I thought it was really Kane, that somehow he had managed to break through the creature's control and was saying his final goodbye. What happened next is almost too horrific to describe. I'm not sure I can even type it out, but I have to try. I have to make sure that someone knows the truth. He began throwing out that black sludge everywhere. The first drop hit my floor like tar, viscous, and darker than midnight. Then my friend's body convulsed, and everything went to hell. His mouth stretched impossibly wide, a black waterfall of putrid sludge cascading out, bringing with it a stench that made me think of rotting corpses left in summer heat. The liquid spread across my hardwood floors like living oil, seeking corners, creeping under furniture. That's when I heard it. The wet crack of bones shifting beneath skin. His ribcage moved like something was pushing out from inside, each snap echoing through my living room like gunshots. The bones didn't just break, they exploded outward. Each new puncture weeping that same dark filth. The thing that used to be my friend sat there, a human colander dripping corruption, while my living room transformed into a lake of that same corruption. The bile rose before I could stop it, my stomach turning inside out as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe it was the concussion, or what was before my very eyes. From the ragged holes in his chest, pale fingers emerged like pale worms after rain, but these weren't burrowing down, they were reaching out. They curled around the edges of his flesh, and then came the sound. I'd torn paper all my life, but this was different. Wet. Wrong. The sound of skin giving way was like wet leather being slowly shredded, each horrible tear punctuated by a sound I can only describe as a sick, wet pop. The fingers worked methodically, clumsily, like a child opening a Christmas present in the dark. Only this gift was my friend's chest being peeled open like a blooming flower made of meat. The scene before me defied reality itself. Kane's body split open like a molting insect, but what emerged wasn't some creature or beast. No, it far much worse. A figure crawled out, leaving behind Kane's empty flesh like a discarded coat. My heart stopped. Standing there, dripping with dark sludge that seemed to evaporate into nothing, was me. Every detail was perfect. The same clothes, the same slightly disheveled hair, even the small scuff on my left shoe. Death would have been a mercy compared to this moment. I'd thought that since this entire thing began, but now, expression on his face. Jehovah's Witness, I thought immediately, but I stayed polite and looked at him questioningly. It was Christmas, after all. You have something that belongs to me, the man said gravely. I want it back. I said. What do you mean? Can I help you with something? I want it back, he repeated sharply. I changed my first observation about the Jehovah's Witness to confused man. All right then, I said, already closing the door. Merry Christmas. He didn't answer back. Returning to the living room, I could still see his unmoving silhouette behind the door. Note to self, I thought. Never open the door after 9. I peered out of the window of my living room, where I had a clear view on the front door. The man was already gone. 5 minutes later, I was immersed in the game I gifted myself for Christmas. But I started to feel uncomfortable as the evening advanced. In short, it felt like someone was watching me. Several times I thought I spotted movement by the window, but when I looked there was no one there. The feeling became so strong that I couldn't focus. I turned off my PlayStation and got up to pee, glimpsing out of the window. Although the street was empty, I could have sworn someone had just been standing there. An uneasy feeling in my stomach, I closed the curtains. I felt a bit of a baby as I turned on all the lights in the apartment, but it eased my mind a little. Until I was in the toilet and heard a loud knock on my living room door. Just as I thought I had imagined it, there was another couple of knocks, more determined now. Carefully, I crept to the door. One of the neighbors? This building had 5 other apartments, but I knew everyone left. It was Christmas, after all. Through the peephole I spotted no one, the hallway was covered in darkness. My neck hairs prickled. The automatic light should have turned on if someone entered. It stayed quiet for a long time. Just as I wanted to return to my couch, there were 3 more loud knocks. Someone wanted to get in. And I realized something else, the door wasn't even closed. Who's there? I asked with a shrill voice. No reply came, but the knocking persisted, not just from the hallway now. There was also pounding from the other side of the apartment, on the door that led to the garden. What the fuck? I whispered in fear. Some kids fucking around, it had to be. When the tapping on the window started, I gathered all my courage and yanked open the living room door. The light flicked on and I peered out. No one. It was suddenly quiet in the other corners of the apartment too. With a trembling sigh, I locked up. It took an hour before I had convinced myself I'd imagined the entire thing. That I had been alone in this apartment for too long and should take a stroll. But I almost fell off my couch when my phone rang. Heart drumming in my throat, I stared at the screen and sighed. My mom. It was a pity call. She wanted to check in, since I was spending Christmas alone. I feigned indifference, said I could entertain myself perfectly. After 10 minutes of small talk, I threw my phone to the other side of the couch. To my frustration, tears welled up in my eyes. God damn it. My phone rang again. What is it, Mom? I asked, slightly irritated. There was only dead silence on the other end. I looked at the screen, unknown number. When I wanted to hang up, a cold voice spoke. You have something that belongs to me. Who the fuck are you? I yelled in the phone. And how did you get my number? But the line had already died. I checked my missed calls, but the last one had been with my mother. Impossible. Mentally drained, I decided to go for bed early. Despite everything, I sunk into an uneasy sleep quickly. That lasted until midnight, when I awoke and realized I hadn't closed the curtains. My back was turned to the window, moonlight casting strange shadows on the wall. Although I wasn't wearing my glasses, I thought I recognized a figure with hat in one of the shapes. I had barely time to register it, when there was a tap on the window. My breath caught and I tried to turn around, but my muscles wouldn't comply. I tried to calm myself. Sleep paralysis, that's what this was. Your mind is awake, your body isn't. You're hallucinating. This is a dream, I told myself. But it was difficult to stand with a hat. Or by Denise, wearing a mean grin on her face. But I only spotted a woman walking her dog. She gave me a strange look and obviously thought I had a screw loose. Back at home, I dumped the entire Christmas tree in the trash. Just to be sure. Did I really believe that Denise, it sounds absolutely insane, cursed me? Had taken revenge by sending someone? Or had I simply been hallucinating for the lack of sleep and all those days alone in that small apartment? The latter seems more probable. But then what about her text, and the complete radio silence after? Although I never saw the mysterious man again, I didn't stay in that house much longer. It felt tainted there, whether it was because of my broken relationship or something else. And one thing I know for sure now. I'm never spending Christmas alone again.